What a wild homecoming weekend it was. Ball State gets their first homecoming win in 4 years. We'll break down the victory over Western Michigan, take a look at some defensive improvements, and take a look ahead at this weekend's game as Ball State heads up north to take on the Central Michigan Chippewas. All that and more coming up. Third Down Chirp starts right now.
Ball State Sports Link's Third Down Chirp is delivered by Papa John's. Better ingredients, better pizza. Visit papajohns.com today for more info.
Hello and welcome into this week's episode of Third Down Chirp, delivered by Papa John's. I'm your host, Chris Renkel, and always I'm joined by Pat Boylan and Timmy Fogarty. A little bit of a different setup. We got rained out of our original stadium set, but we're here in the Alumni Center surrounded by a lot of Ball State history.
Chris, we were rained out, we were lightninged out, we were thundered out, but the show must go on. A good show here for you this week. Hopefully getting those Cardinals to the 5th win coming up here on Saturday.
And guys, I'm actually not too mad about it. I mean, we get to sit in these chairs. Man, they're comfy. I might just fall asleep during the show.
Well, we'll be sure to wake you up. And if you fell asleep during last week's homecoming game, you missed one heck of a game as we take a look back at some of the highlights between the Cardinals and the Broncos on a wild and windy day at Schumann Stadium. Juwan Edwards would take it around the right side, 11-yard touchdown run for Quake. Ball State gets on the board first.
The start of a big day for Juwan Edwards, one of his 3 rushing touchdowns.
Anton Skirvin next in. He ties it up at 7. Western Michigan could not be stopped on the ground all game, but through the air, Van Tubbergen trying to score again. A little bit of a jump pass. It is tipped by Freeman, tipped around, and another interception by the defensive line.
Van Tubbergen trying to play his best Tim Tebow impersonation. Great play by Freeman there, getting a hand on it.
Van Tubbergen now he's going to find Josh Schaefer, 45-yard touchdown catch and run, and he almost was not touched.
And if you look carefully, there's Chris Renkel, but a big touchdown for Western Michigan. They could not stop the defense early.
And here's Brian Fields on the ground. Western Michigan could not be stopped. 23-yard touchdown run. The Broncos would be up 21-7 at the half. All looked lost, but Quake put the team on his back. He's going to cut back, and he's going to find the end zone for the second time, pulling Ball State a little bit closer.
Yeah, they were down 21-7, but they always make great halftime adjustments, and you saw it right there.
Barrington Scott trying to get on the rushing, but he coughs up the football. No harm, no foul. The defense comes up with a stop, and then Keith Wenning to take the lead. Jamil Smith.
Could this throw be more perfect? I mean, in the rain, in the wind, a picture-perfect throw from Keith. It does not get better than that.
24-21, Ball State would lead. Western Michigan gets the ball back. Van Tubbergen looking for the score. Picked off by Tony Martin. He doesn't go down. Fumble goes back to Western Michigan.
Get down. You make the pick. Get down.
Haldeman kicks a 52-yarder to tie it up. So guess what, guys? We are headed to overtime. And in overtime, who else but Juwan Edwards plowing people over, going into the end zone, and Quake making Muncie proud as Ball State goes on to win with the game-winning touchdown. And after a wild overtime win, Ball State comes out with the victory, 30-24 the final. Keith Wenning, 265 yards passing, 1 touchdown, but how about Juwan Edwards?
You're right, Chris. How about him? 23 carries, 138 yards, over 6 yards a carry for Juwan, and the most important stat there, 3 touchdowns.
Guys, Edwards had a monster game, but check out Willie Snead. A very quiet big game, 9 catches, 147 yards through the air.
And so many guys playing well in the Western Michigan win, both offensively and defensively. But if you have to give player of the game to, who do you have?
Well, I'm going with Juwan Edwards. Again, that tremendous day. But if he doesn't get those 3 touchdowns, I mean, they all came in huge situations. To start off the game, his second one from 23 yards out was a big one to draw Ball State back. And then, of course, his game winner in prototypical Juwan Edwards fashion, running over players into the end zone.
I mean, Edwards was extremely impressive, guys, but I want to just put it with a whole unit. I'm going to go with the defense. I mean, a defense that struggled immensely, through the first 6 games of the season. At the second half of the game against Western Michigan, played out of their minds. They only gave up 3 points and really dominated the whole entire game. And Coach Bateman, has just been on the field the last couple weeks, has been so excited with his defense. There's been so much intensity, and it's great to see. And quite frankly, the defense for once this year is the reason Ball State won this game.
After the game, here's Coach Lumbo and Jawan Edwards talking about the win.
We've lost a couple close ones here the last 2 weeks that could have gone either way had we made one more play down the end of the stretch. And today, it was ugly at times. There were a lot of mistakes. There were things that hurt both teams, but we were able to persevere and make 1 or 2 more plays down the stretch.
Well, they wasn't really trying to bring me down. They was more trying to get the ball because they had missed the field goal, and they just wanted the ball back. And I just cuffed the ball with 2 hands, kept my feet moving, and the lineman gave me a little bit of push. And the next thing I know, I was in the end zone.
They really did, and that was probably the most consistent half that we've had maybe in the last year and a half. We've seen good defense in spurts. We've seen 2-3 drives and then giving up a big play or giving up a long drive for a touchdown. And they really came out with a great mindset in the second half, and Jay Bateman and his staff did a nice job with some adjustments at halftime.
And Ball State Western Michigan, of course, not the only Mid-American Conference game going on this past weekend as we take a look around the MAC presented by Fox College Sports, starting off with Ohio. Just edging out an Akron team 34-28, 3 weeks in a row. Ohio has almost lost.
Yeah, and 3 weeks in a row they've played what is thought to have been at least the 3 worst teams in the conference. They win by a combined 16 points in those games.
In the West, Toledo beats Eastern Michigan, but just barely, 52-47.
Toledo stays undefeated in conference play, but teams, just continue to put big numbers on the Rockets.
And in the MAC standings, Toledo, top of the MAC West, 6-1, tied with Northern Illinois. But Ohio on the MAC East sitting pretty at 7-0.
But you look where Ball State could be. Without that win against Western Michigan, they'd be 1-3 in conference and just fighting to stay at the mid-level point of their division.
And this weekend's game, a big one. Ball State starts a 3-game road trip starting in Mount Pleasant, taking on the Central Michigan Chippewas, a back-and-forth Chippewas team that you really don't know what to expect. We caught up with several players and Coach Bateman after practice to talk about this weekend's game.
We need to create more turnovers, and that's something we spent a lot of time in practice the last 2 weeks trying to find ways to create turnovers, and I think that's going to be a huge thing going forward because I think every game we play is going to be dead even. So we got to find a way to to make some plays on defense that turn the tide a little bit. And then I think we've been really good on third downs the last 2 weeks, and we talk to our kids all the week. We call them money downs. If you can win third downs, you make a lot of money. So we're going to try and win third downs and try and create turnovers. And that's what we're going to try and do the last 5 weeks.
They're like every defense. They've got their favorite blitzes. I'm sure they're going to have a wrinkle here and a wrinkle there for us. But they're a pretty standard team, in my opinion. They run 4 down, 2 linebackers with a nickel. So they're we kind of know what they're going to do, we think. Any given Sunday or Saturday for us. But, they've got a solid defense. They're well coached. They play hard, so it's going to be a good challenge for us. He shouldn't get sacked at all. That's kind of our goal. That's what we want to happen. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but to keep him upright and to give us, lanes in the running game, is our goal at all times, and we've been doing all right so far. We got big bruisers like Jawan and Barrington that can run people over. We got Horatio that can, run past anybody. And my favorite might be Donegan just because, he kind of gets lost in the pile. He gets out there and he starts running off. We call him crazy legs because the legs kind of go everywhere, but it's great. And, there's more guys that can play too. That's the scary thing. The offensive line, it's 5 separate positions, but really where we play as one, especially with the schemes that we run with our zone. And to know what the other one's thinking and how we're going to react on certain plays has been a big key to our success this year so far.
And should be a great game between the Chippewas and Cardinals this weekend as we break down these 2 teams a little bit further in our head-to-head segment. Starting with the quarterbacks and 2 very good ones, Ryan Radcliffe. He really has the arm and the ability to give defenses a lot of trouble.
Well, he's not an elite MAC quarterback, but he's not bad. He gets the job done. He's pretty inconsistent, but you catch him on a good day for him. He threw over 400 yards against Ball State last year.
And guys, Keith Winning already over 2,000 yards on the season, 5 games left. It's looking pretty positive that he's going to get over 3,000 on the season.
And at the running back position, 2 bruisers in the backfield.
Yeah, Zerlon Tipton is a lot like Jawan Edwards. He's a big back. He can plow you over. And he was a guy that wouldn't really worry you in the past, but he's had enough experience. Now he does.
Ball State fans last week were extremely happy to see Juwan Edwards from the first couple of weeks. 3 touchdowns last week, so hopefully he can continue that against Central.
At wide receiver, Willie Snead quietly putting up another big performance, but Cody Wilson, it seems like he's been there forever, another good MAC wide receiver.
I'm pretty sure Wilson's going on his 8th or his 9th year of eligibility at Central Michigan, but he is exactly what you want in a slot receiver. Reminds you of a guy like Brandon Stokely.
And guys, Willie Snead, he's not your 4-4 guy. He's not going to beat you, flat out flying by you, but he just seems to always be at the right place at the right time.
And on the defensive side of the ball, Ball State really improved the last couple of weeks defensively, and they're trying to build off of a strong second half against the Broncos.
And luckily, for the first time in a couple of weeks, the Cardinals not playing a team that has good pressure from the defensive line, only 7 sacks in 6 games for Central Michigan.
Also, guys, check it out. The opponent red zone percentage no longer at 100%. A couple of stops for the Cardinals this week, down to 88.
And we hit a little bit about it, though. The defense just has shown such improvement after struggling the first couple games and perhaps blowing the game against Kent State and Northern Illinois. They're starting to become a really solid part of this Ball State team. So, Pat, this defense just, it's been such a turnaround so quickly.
Well, in the first half, you kind of worried because it looked like they were reverting back to old ways. They allowed 21 points, and it could have been 28 if the defense didn't get a pick there in the end zone. You saw it earlier in the highlights, but really they swarmed to the ball. They tackled, and there really wasn't one play. In the past, there's been one play that the defense always struggled with during the game. Early on in the season, it was that wide receiver screen. Later on in the year, it was the deep pass. Early in this game, it was the run. But they got kind of everything figured out to the point where Western could not continually count on one play, and I think they were just, most importantly, they were consistent.
Well, and another huge thing, guys, is I think, look at the talent they faced in the first half of the season. I mean, Kent State's a lot better than people thought this season, and you had to place Taj Boyd in Clemson, a great quarterback, a great offense. And then you have B.J. Daniels at South Florida, who is arguably one of the best athletes I've ever seen in person. So that really got this defense ready. Yeah, they got crushed in a lot of those games, but, I mean, you're playing some of the better, most athletic teams in the entire country. So, and Coach Bateman now has moved down to the field, and he's able to, after timeouts, instead of having to talk to him just on headsets, he can actually say to him, hey, here's what I'm seeing. He can show him on a whiteboard, this is the offense I'm seeing, this is what they're trying to do, here's what we're going to do. So I think just the talent that they faced early and that Bateman is now down on the field, I mean, those are huge, huge factors.
And after practice this week, we caught up with Coach Bateman to talk about the defensive improvements and him being back in his natural position on the sidelines.
Our defensive kids hear from me so much. It's kind of that one voice thing, and I think it's helped us settle down on the sideline. I'd like to think I had that much impact on the defense, but I think it's mostly just getting a little bit older. Guys get a little bit more comfortable with the defense. We're just playing a little bit better. Well, I mean, I would talk to them on the headsets a lot, so it wasn't like I just think it's the one voice thing. They hear from me so much. I know exactly how I want to do it, and I just think part of it really is just some guys like Brandon Newman and Jarrett Swab, even though they're older, they're really true freshmen, so some of those kids getting a little bit better hang of things, and I really think it's just our kids playing a little bit better, and I think that'll continue the rest of the year. We've been good at times and bad at times. I think the thing with us has got to be consistency. You can take quarters against anybody, against South Florida, against Clemson, against anybody, and say, man, we looked really good right there. But at the same time, you can take quarters where we look god-awful, like the first quarter against Western Michigan. So we got to find out why that's happening and work at it, and we're trying that. And I think our kids are going to keep playing hard, and as long as they play hard, we'll be fine.
All right, and this weekend, such a big game for Ball State. If they want to stay in contention for the MAC title and for a bowl berth, who should we be watching this weekend, Pat?
Player to watch was my past week's player of the game. That's Juwan Edwards. I think he's going to be a big factor in this game. Central Michigan has really struggled to defend the run. Now, to be fair, they have played Navy. That skews some statistics. But still, in general, you take that game out, and they still struggle with the run. And Juwan Edwards, a guy who looks like at least he's starting to get back on track a little bit to early in the season form. And I'll tell you what, if he's running for 6-7 yards a carry, multiple touchdowns, he's well over 100 yards, guys. The Cardinal team's really going to have to try to lose this game.
And I'm going to stay on the offense as well, Pat. I'm going to go with Jamil Smith. We hear so much now about Willie Snead, and arguably we should. I mean, he's put up 700 yards receiving already, but Jamil is very overlooked, and he's put up some monster stats himself. He gets 74 yards a game receiving. He has 48 catches and 3 touchdowns on the season. And guys, he's one of those receivers that, Willie could go for 100 yards, but Jamil could have 13 catches for, 150 yards, but no touchdowns, and he just gets overlooked. So I think my player to watch this week is going to be Jamil Smith. He's shifty, he's athletic, he can do everything, and I mean, all the fans know that. They've seen him the first 7 weeks of the season, but there's so much talk about Willie Snead. I think people are starting to overlook Jamil Smith.
And on the opposite end of that spectrum, who do you really look for to improve?
This one it's always tough every week to pick a player to improve. It's always the toughest category. For me, this is the toughest that has ever been. And I'm kind of going to go with a little bit of a wild card here, and I really do like him. It's Scott Secor, the kickoff specialist. And the reason I'm going to go with that is because we've seen the boot that Scott Secor has. I mean, he's got one of the biggest legs that I've ever seen from a collegiate kicker anywhere. And he'll probably be handling the place kicking duties next year. He's doing the kickoffs this year. But if you remember early in the year, there were a lot of touchbacks produced by Secor. And as the year's gone on, that number has slowly kind of but surely gone down. And you saw against Kent State, Drew Archer had a touchdown return. This past week against Western Michigan, they didn't return for a touchdown but had a lot of opportunities to. I'd like to see Scott Secor get that ball through the end zone just a little bit more.
I love that pick because I agree with you 100%, but I'm going to go with a unit again, and I'm going to go with the offensive line. And by no means have they've actually played tremendous. But if you look at the beginning of the season, when they played Clemson, IU, South Florida, you know, those three big FBS games, winning was basically untouchable. I mean, none of those defenses, despite their size and athleticism, got to Keith winning. And then, you know, you see Northern Illinois, they knocked him down a little bit, not a lot of sacks. And then Western only sacked him, I think, once, but they knocked him down a lot. So the last couple weeks, he's kind of got some pressure on him. He's got some hands in his face, something we didn't really see at the beginning of the year. So this offensive line, they're a very experienced group. They're a very, you know, just skilled group in general. So really look for them to improve a little bit this week, and Keith to have all the time in the world in the pocket.
And finally, guys, keys to the game, what are they?
For me, it's the pressure the defensive line gets on Ryan Radcliffe and company. Radcliffe is a good quarterback if you give him time. He torched the Cardinal defense last year here at Schumann Stadium, but 2 years ago the Cardinals went into Central Michigan, and they were pretty heavy underdogs going into that game. Central just a year out of the Lefevre 10-2 season, and they were still pretty high on themselves. And Robert Edens, the pass rusher at the time, had 4 sacks in that game and just terrorized Ryan Radcliffe, and he really, really struggled. This is a kid, I know it speaks with every quarterback. You get pressure on him and he's different. But with Ryan Radcliffe, it's magnified. He was a completely different quarterback when Edens got pressure on him. This time it's Jonathan Newsom and company. If Newsom or Miles, or really anyone for that matter, can do something similar and get a lot of pressure on Radcliffe, Central Michigan's really going to struggle to move the football.
Guys, I'm going to go with something that Coach Limbo and his staff really stresses, and that's limiting penalties. I mean, Central Michigan, they're one of the better teams in the country at limiting penalties. They're only getting 17 on the season, on the whole entire year. Ball State, who is also a good team at penalties, they have 39 on the season. So, I mean, you can see how lopsided that is, and that's something that Coach Limbo and all his guys, you know, really like to see is this team limit those. And of course, every coach wants this team to limit penalties. But look back a couple weeks ago. Willie Snead catches that long touchdown in a Northern game that they lost and was called back on a holding penalty. And then, you know, there are a couple other pass interference penalties on receivers that you've seen big plays called back. So a lot of penalties have really came to plague Ball State this season. So I think that is going to be huge against Central Michigan this weekend, just because they don't get a lot of penalties at all, guys.
It should be a great game up in Mount Pleasant. If you can't make it up there, or even if you can, be sure to listen to the three of us. SportsLink Radio 91.3, WCRD, and WCRD.net. Kickoff at 3:30. All right, guys, it's now time for our What's Chirping question of the week. Remember, you can tweet a question at us at Down Chirp or hashtag TweetPete. If we choose your question and answer it on air, you get a free pizza courtesy of Papa John's. Our question this week comes from Simon Wilder, who asks, do you think Willie Snead has a legit shot to compete for the Blitnikoff Award, guys? He's number 3 in the nation right now, receiving-wise.
Should he have a chance, Chris? Yes. Will he? Realistically, no. As a sophomore, first of all, this award almost every single year goes to someone in the Big 6 BCS conferences. And you only have to look back a few years for a great case for that. Bowling Green had a guy named Freddie Barnes who broke the NCAA catches record, didn't just break it, he shattered it. And in that year, he still didn't win the award. So for Willie Snead, he's going to have to do something fantastic, and it's likely not going to happen in this conference, at least as a sophomore. But I will tell you one thing. He starts to continue to improve. His stats get better. Each year continues to improve. By that senior year, if he continues to do all those kind of things, he's definitely going to be in consideration. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, Pat, I agree with you. I mean, he should be, absolutely, guys, but realistically, like you said, it's usually a big conference receiver gets the award almost every year. And like the stats that Freddie Barnes put up were just obnoxious almost, because he was just every week, you know, it was just so many catches. And Willie Snead, I mean, he already has 771 yards receiving on the season. He's third in the entire country. I mean, that's just ridiculous for a MAC receiver. And like you said, the biggest thing there, he's only a sophomore, Ball State fans. So you've got 2 more full years of this kid just really making some noise. And like you said, Pat, I don't think he can compete this year realistically. But his junior year and senior year, if he puts up those kind of stats again, people better watch out for Willie Snead.
Thank you for your question, Simon Welder. You've just won a free pizza courtesy of Papa John's. And remember, if you didn't win this week, you can always have a chance to win next week. Just tweet a question at Third Down Chirp or hashtag TweetPete. And for the latest in Ball State sports news and stories, be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Just search Ball State Sports Link. All right, guys, prediction time, Pat. You're falling behind a little bit here. Timmy is kind of running away with this competition. I don't want to say must win, but this is kind of a must win scenario.
Well, first of all, shouldn't this be like golf? When you win, you have to go first. Every week I have to go first, and Timmy undercuts me. But I'm gonna go Ball State 38-24. I think we see a real rejuvenated effort out of this squad. And sometimes, I mean, this dates even back to Coach Parrish, and Coach Lembo said the same thing. Sometimes, in a weird way, it almost helps to go on the road. It kind of helps you get focused. You don't have to worry about all the things surrounding campus. You have to worry about your bus, your team, when you're eating, and that's about it. So maybe this week can really rejuvenate this team. This is a Central Michigan team that if Ball State plays well, they can win. I'm going 38-24. Ball State wins. By the way, wanted to congratulate Timmy. He's made it awake the entire show.
I have. Well, don't speak so soon. I might just fall asleep during this. No, Pat, this week I'm actually going a little different than you. You win a big win. I'm going with a small win. I think that Ball State squeaks out 34-31, quite frankly, because we don't know what type of Central Michigan team we're going to see. I mean, they're one of the most inconsistent teams in the entire country. One week they'll look tremendous, and the next week it looks like they don't even know how to play football. So, but Ball State-wise, I mean, last week their defense looked tremendous. The best they've looked all season, I think, in that second half. And their running game was back on track. Their passing game, even though it was in the rain, they still were successful with that. So I think with Ball State's balanced attack and their defense seems to show big improvements, I just don't think that Central Michigan can hang on with the Cardinals.
Again, it should be a great game up in Mount Pleasant. 3:30 kickoff. Listen to the three of us on SportsLink Radio, and hopefully, again, it's a must-win for Pat this week, so we'll see if he can actually pull this one out. But anyway, that's going to bring us to our last segment of the show. Be sure to catch us every week on Fox College Sports nationally, across Indiana on Comcast Indiana, and then, of course, locally in Muncie on WIPB-TV. And if you want to know really the reason why we're in the Alumni Center, be sure to stay tuned after the show for our weekly blooper. The blooper doesn't do it justice, but it'll kind of give you a little look into why we're in here and why we feel a lot safer being in here than out at the stadium this week. So for all of us at SportsLink and for Timmy Fogarty and Pat Boylan, I'm Chris Renkel. Thank you for watching Third Down Chirp this week. Until next week, go Cardinals.
Like the record was like 115 to get like the record.
Holy cow! What? Where did that hit?
That would hit right above us.